Alright, what's up guys? And today we're watching 4th of July short horror stories in courtesy of 4th of July. I only got 2 videos for today because I'm on a time limit. But the first one is 3 true scary 4th of July horror stories by Mr. Nightmare. I'll leave the links down in the description so you guys can go watch them for yourself. But without further ado, get to the video. By Chester. Story 1.
I live in a normal suburban town. It was 4th of July weekend, so I had a mini party in my backyard. My parents were away, so it would work out perfectly. I invited about 20 people. We have a pool, so I told people to bring their bathing suits. I also had some fireworks left over from last year that I told everyone we'd shoot off towards the end of the night. I tried to keep the gathering strictly in the backyard because I didn't fully trust people not to make a mess inside the house. Everything went fine. Anywhere from 20 to 30 people showed up. Everyone stayed in the yard. Some people jumped in the pool, others played drinking games, and later in the night we shot off some fireworks in the street. The party started to die down after 12, and by 1:30 everyone was gone. There were a million red plastic cups in the yard and tons of empty cans and bottles. But that was a mess to worry about tomorrow. I was beat. I went inside and changed out of my clothes and brushed my teeth, then crawled into bed. I was pretty buzzed, so I didn't think I'd have any trouble falling asleep. Suddenly, outside, I heard firecrackers going off. It sounded like it was right outside my window, in our backyard. I got up and looked out the window, and to my confusion and downright horror, I saw a line of firecrackers going off next to our pool. My initial reaction was to yell out the window who did that. I figured it had to be one of my friends who stayed behind pranking me. I ran downstairs into the back door. I slid open the glass door but kept the bug screen door closed. I looked around the backyard and said again, "Who's out there?" By now the firecrackers had finished going off. Someone was back there, and they just set them off. That doesn't happen by accident. I texted as many people as I could think to, and then the group chat asking who was still at my house. Only a few people answered, most likely because a lot of people were asleep already. Everyone who answered said they're in bed or at home though. I stepped outside into the backyard and looked around for a minute, and when I saw no one, I went back in, shut the door and locked it, and went back upstairs to my room. I was barely in bed for 5 minutes before hearing something come from the upstairs living room down the hall. Then I heard the sound of a beer pong ball falling off the table and bouncing on the wood floor. My heart started to race. Was someone in the house? Did one of my friends pass out on one of the downstairs couches? Or maybe in one of the other bedrooms? While this seemed like a possibility, I wasn't about to go out there. I got out of bed and went to the door to put my ear up to it and listen. I didn't hear anything for a moment. I waited, and then, clear as day, I heard footsteps approaching my door, then the doorknob jiggling. The door was locked. There was a loud bang on the door. I screamed through the door to get out of here or I'll shoot you. A deep male's voice on the other side said, "Jay, you in there?" And I heard another deep voice in the room with me say, "Yeah." I turned to the corner by my drawers and realized there was someone there. I screamed my soul out as this man came over to me holding what looked like a gun in his hand. He then put his hand over my mouth and told me to shut up or he'd kill me. He then unlocked the door and opened it, and there was another masked man. They whispered to each other as they had me at gunpoint, now sitting on the bed. One of them then said to me, "Stay right there and don't move." The other guy left the room and went straight to my parents' room. He came back and asked the combination to my parents' safe, which I said I had no idea, which was the truth. There were a total of 3 intruders in the house. One kept me at gunpoint while the other 2 pilfered the house, stealing my mom's jewelry that was left out, along with any other valuables they found. After the longest 10 minutes of my life, one of the men yelled, "Let's go," and the man who had me at gunpoint left the room, and I heard them all hurry out the back door. I tried to see what kind of car they left in through a window, but it appeared they didn't park near my house. I called 911 right away. As soon as police arrived, they asked if we had any cameras around the house, which we didn't. They then asked if I got any of the names or saw any of their faces, and all I could give them was that one of them was referred to as Jay by the others. They asked if I saw the getaway vehicle, and I said no. The police asked a bunch of neighboring houses if they had cameras that may have picked up on the robbers, and after my neighbors all reviewed their doorbell cameras, none of them picked anything up. I think my house was targeted by a group who saw I was having a party, and they set the firecrackers off to lead me outside of the house so they could sneak in. That's the most likely explanation to me. My parents were livid with me for having the party, as they believed that led to the robbery. But they also were relieved I'm okay, and sympathetic that I had to experience this. Because of this experience, I'm a strong advocate for having security cameras around your house. It was 4th of July 2015. The park by my house was having their annual fireworks show, but it always gets way too crowded and chaotic. Plus, parking is non-existent. Little did most people know there's a little sump next to the park that had a perfect view of the fireworks show. I found this out through one of my friends one year. This sump was accessible through one of the dead-end residential streets that ran alongside the park. Since the 4th was on a Saturday this year, it would probably be even more crowded, but it would also make a perfect date. I was talking to this girl Ashley I met in one of my classes the previous semester, and we'd already been on a few dates over the course of a few months. I asked her if she'd want to go to the fireworks show with me, and she said she already really wanted to go, so absolutely. She came to my house first, and then we walked from my house to the park since it was so close, and we were bringing alcohol. I told her we'd have our own little private spot to watch the show at that no one else really knew about, and she said she was super down. Along with some tequila and soda, I brought a big blanket for us to lay on in my backpack. There was already a lot of commotion by the park entrance. We walked right past it as the cars were piling up in the parking lot. We continued down the dead end where the sump was. The sump was...
Yeah. Hold on, Chad. I gotta go find my I gotta go grab my AirPods. AirPods are gone. I can't find them. Oh, well, Chad. We'll continue.
Was rectangular and fenced off, but it was very easy to get inside. The gate wasn't even locked. Inside the sump was just a bunch of trees, and then at the bottom of it, a small grass clearing, where we planned to lay out the blanket. I led us to the gate, which yet again wasn't locked, and I quietly opened and closed it. I told her to be careful as we walked downhill into the sump. It was around 8 o'clock, which was when the fireworks were supposed to start. I laid out the blanket on the smoothest part of the ground. I didn't take into account how dark it would be in there before the fireworks started, so we both turned on our phone flashlights and laid them down just as temporary lights. We started making tequila sodas right away. From down in the sump, we couldn't really hear any other people from up in the park, just the occasional car horns honking. It was right around the time we started the first drink that both of us heard something from behind us. It was like the sound of brush being stepped on. We turned around to see darkness. I pointed my flashlight over there, but it didn't really reach that far. The iPhones back then were like the 6s. I don't remember their flashlights being the best. Ashley asked me how likely it was that other people would come down here. I replied that other than a couple of my friends knowing about it, I doubted anyone else would come down. I explained to her that it could have been a small animal. The first fireworks were shot into the air, which startled us. The fireworks would light up the entire sump briefly though, especially the bigger ones and when multiple were shot at once. At this point, we drank and watched the fireworks for a solid few minutes, before again, I heard something behind us. I don't think Ashley heard it, but she looked back when I looked and asked what I was looking at. I said nothing, not wanting to scare her. This was my idea after all, but now I was getting paranoid. I decided to turn around and stare into the trees and brush, and as the sump lit up again from multiple big fireworks exploding, I saw a black figure standing in the trees and brush above us. They appeared to be hiding. I whispered, "There's someone up there." She turned and looked, but now it went dark again because there was a short few-second gap in fireworks. When the sump lit up again, the figure I saw wasn't there anymore. I shortly freaked her out though because she said she wanted to leave. Since we were both definitely creeped out now, we agreed to leave while the fireworks were still going, lighting the sump up. I packed up the blanket and alcohol, and of course the fireworks show ended right there. It was now dark and quiet again in the sump, so we turned our flashlights back on and walked up the hill. As we neared the top, I couldn't help but shine my flashlight into the trees in the general vicinity that I saw that figure before, and I felt my heart skip a beat, seeing a black figure again, maybe 10 feet away. It appeared to be a person in a black hoodie or robe with the hood up, even though it was like an 82-degree night. They were standing behind a big tree, but then, as if in response to the light, they started to run through the brush at us. I pushed Ashley along to hurry up as they yelled to go. We got the hell out of there and basically ran down the street until we were around other people. We weren't followed. I'm not sure what that person was doing in there, but it seemed they were stalking us the entire fireworks show, and them running towards us meant they wanted to hurt us. I only saw one person, so I believe they were alone, but I could be wrong. I stayed clear from going in that sump ever again.
Story 3, Kyle Hoft.
After several friends of mine and I were done lighting off fireworks, one of my friends, Zach, took about 4 of us to this unfinished house in a relatively new neighborhood. 2 of the people became disinterested pretty quickly, so they left before we even started examining the house, leaving only 3 of us, Zach, myself, and Adam. None of the walls were completed on the house. It mainly just consisted of floorboards and 2x4s holding up the place. You could see outside in most parts of the house, and the basement had a cement floor and cement walls. The house consisted of 2 floors and a basement, so 3 floors in total. The steps were completed enough so that we could travel up and down them easily. As we started inspecting the house, Zach told us to keep our phone flashlights off as much as possible because the houses next to us were finished and inhabited, and the people living there might call the cops if they noticed us snooping around. We therefore were mainly just going off the moonlight from outside for vision. The 3 of us stuck together most of the time. As soon as we walked upstairs, we could hear a voice from the main floor or the basement, so we would run downstairs to find out what it is, and as soon as we did that, we would hear a noise from upstairs, so we would run up there. This pattern continued for a good while. We assumed the noises were just the wind knocking over pieces of wood, pipes, or whatever else that was lying around, or it was some kind of animal running around the house. Eventually, as we were walking slowly in the basement, trying to discover who or what it was making the noises, I saw someone slowly walking up the stairs next to me. I could see a light emanate from his or her phone, but it wasn't strong enough for me to be able to see who he or she was. I whispered to Zach and Adam, "Is that you?" They both said it wasn't them, and it turns out that they were both right in front of me. Shortly after I asked that, I saw a bunch of pipes that were leaned against the unfinished wall fall over down the stairs. It didn't look like they fell over by accident. It looked like someone deliberately pushed them over. At that point, I knew whatever we were hearing was not an animal or the wind. I knew that someone else was in the house. After that encounter, the 3 of us stormed out of the house. We all stood on the neighborhood road a decent distance from the house, discussing what just happened. Zach was convinced that the person I saw was one of the 2 friends who decided to leave earlier. I told him that there was no way it was either of them. One of them was a girl who didn't want to get her shoes dirty, and the other was a guy who was dating this girl and was around her all the time, so I couldn't picture either of them doing that. I tried to convince him that it wasn't them, but he didn't fully believe me. He then realized that he lost his keys and he had to go back in the house to find them anyway. That left Adam and I to stand around to wait for him. As Adam and I were waiting for Zach, I thought I could see a big, dark figure coming from around the right side of the house, but I couldn't tell for sure. We were still trying to not use our flashlights so the neighbors wouldn't notice us. After a few minutes, Zach came back with his keys and said he saw someone in the house again. I told him what I saw. Still convinced that it was our other two friends messing with us, he walked around the left side of the house. Adam and I followed him. When he got to the back of the house, I saw him jump up and say, "Run." We ran away. He later said he saw a tall, dark figure reaching his arms up and slowly moving towards him. I ran out to the road in front of the house. I thought both Adam and Zach were following me, but I could only see Zach behind me. When I stopped running, there was a giant dumpster in front of me. I was on the left side of it and Zach was on the other side. I saw Zach look to his right, to an area behind the dumpster that I couldn't see from where I was standing. I heard him say, "We don't want any trouble." He then told me to run to his truck. He drove me to the house in his truck and Adam drove separately. Apparently Adam had already gone to his car. I ran towards the truck and we took off. Zach told me that he saw a big dark figure approaching him. After he said, "We don't want any trouble," he saw the figure going behind the dumpster, heading in my direction, and that's why he told me to run for the truck. Adam later mentioned that as he took off in his car, he saw 3 figures running after him in the rearview mirror. Chances are these figures could have been neighbors messing with us, but the way in which they acted was very strange. Considering how big and tall some of them seemed to be, it's hard for me to believe that they were just teenagers. Zach was in his early 20s, Adam was in his late teens, and I was in my late 20s when this happened. I can't help but wonder who those people were, and how capable they were of doing something far worse than just messing with us and scaring us away. I can't help but wonder if maybe they were some weird members of a cult who regularly got together in that house late at night, and that's why they were trying to scare us away. Since this was the 4th of July, there was a bigger chance of weirdos walking around. But Zach said that there were people who chased after him another time he was at that same house. I wasn't there with him that time, so I can't go into too much detail on that story, but I wonder if those were the same people.
Alright, so that was the first video. I like that one. My thoughts about it. First one. I don't know. I'd be pissed if I found somebody just chilling in my room behind me. And the fact that there was like 2 or 3 of them. I don't know. I'd rate the first one a good like 6 out of 10. The second one was pretty good too. I'd probably get a stronger flashlight, like buy one from the store, or like I know. Well, glow sticks wouldn't do anything. I'd buy a stronger flashlight from the store instead of just using the phone flashlight. Move on to this one. I'll continue. So, the third story. That'd be creepy as fuck if that was like a whole ass cult. Second story, I didn't rate that one. Hold on. Let me think about that. I think the second story was like 5 out of 10, and the third one was like a good. Oh, that one was pretty fucking creepy. That was like 8 out of 10. We got our got the second video, 3 true disturbing 4th of July horror stories by Chilling Scares. Let's start listening to this one.
On
On the 4th of July, when I was 15, my uncle's family was hosting a party at their house, something we did every year as our annual family get-together. For some context, they live on a quiet farmhouse in Kansas, surrounded by cornfields, the perfect place to have our own big fireworks show. My family and our extended family from one side all arrived, along with all my cousins early that afternoon. I spent most of the day in my cousin's room with some of my other relatives, playing my uncle's Nintendo 64, as my parents never let me have one. As the sun was just starting to set, we all gathered around the dining room table, eating a spread of barbecue foods, grilled burgers, hot dogs, corn on the cob, and all the classic 4th of July stuff. My youngest cousin, Tommy, was the first to finish his meal and ran off into another room. My mom instructed me to go bring him back to the table. I walked into the living room expecting to see him on the couch, but he wasn't there. I noticed the backyard motion detecting lights had turned on, signaling movement. I stepped onto the back patio and looked around the yard, calling his name. It was dark out there, and the lights didn't reach that far into the darkness, so if he was out there, I couldn't see him. I continued yelling his name, but got no response, so I went around to the side of the house to see if he was there. Sure enough, I found him standing against the edge of the cornfield looking in. I pulled him back and asked what he was doing. He replied, "I was just talking to that man." Confused, I pressed him further, asking him, "What man?" He said there was a tall man standing in the cornfield. I glanced over into the field, but didn't see anything. "Come on, let's go back inside," I told him, deep down feeling a sense of unease. Returning to the dining room table, I told my dad about the incident. However, he dismissed it, focusing on his conversation with the adults. After dinner, we got out ice cream and various desserts as we awaited my uncle's annual fireworks show. After which, I'd all but completely forgotten about this supposed man in the cornfield. As it got to about 10 p.m., most people began to leave as they had long drives back home ahead of them. My family would be staying the night. Later, my two cousins and I were staying up playing Nintendo 64 in my cousin Jackson's room. Tommy had to go to sleep, so it was me, Jackson, and my other cousin Jared. We had to keep the volume low as people were sleeping in just the other room. This allowed us to hear something from the backyard. We all exchanged anxious glances with each other. Jackson approached the window, but suddenly ducked down. We asked him what he was doing. He said there was some guy on the swing set in the backyard. I didn't want to believe him, but I also knew Jackson wasn't the kind of guy to joke about something like this. My army crawled to the window and quickly peered out of it to look for myself. Sure enough, there was a dark figure sitting on one of the swings, swinging back and forth, which is where the noise was coming from. I tried to duck down before he noticed, but he had already turned his head up towards me. Laying on the floor, we whispered to each other, desperately trying to find any logical explanation. But the figure was too tall to be any of our parents. After a few seconds, we realized the squeaking from the swing had stopped. We were too afraid to look out of the window, so we just laid on the floor for another 5 minutes or so. We then agreed that someone should check if he was still there. I slowly sat up to take another look. The man was now standing in the grass, staring up at me with this wide, open-mouthed smile. I didn't know what to do, so I opened the window and started yelling threats at him, to which he gave no reaction, instead just kept smiling. We all ran down the hall to wake up our parents. Amidst the commotion, Tommy had woken up and walked over to the window. He started telling us that it was the same man from earlier in the cornfield. I took another look out the window. The man then turned around and sprinted back into the tall corn stalks. By the time our parents had gotten outside, the man was gone. They ran around the backyard for a bit, yelling out threats into the darkness, but despite even searching part of the cornfield, they never found anything. It took around an hour for everyone to calm down, at which point our parents told us all to go back to bed. We never saw that guy again. Today I'm much older, and the whole situation still remains extremely creepy to me. It's still a common topic among our annual family gatherings to this day.
Yeah, that first story, that was pretty creepy. I don't know how you would react to somebody just swinging on your swing outside your window. I'd probably go, I'd shoot a bottle rocket at him. Yeah. That story was a good 9 out of 10. I don't like the thought of looking out my window and just seeing somebody staring at me. Not happening. Story 2.
This happened almost a decade ago now. I was 17 at the time and going into my senior year of high school. It was the 4th of July, and one of my friends was holding a massive party at his house with practically everyone in our class going. I won't bore you with the details, so just imagine your typical high school party. It was about 2 a.m. when things were starting to die down. I was about to leave with another friend of mine who lived on the same block as me. I didn't have a license yet at that point, and neither did he, so we planned to walk back together. The walk was only about 25 minutes. We said our goodbyes and started walking. The road was predictably empty at that hour, with no one but us on the sidewalk and the occasional car passing by. My friend wanted to pick up a pack of cigarettes, so we took a slight detour and stopped at a 24-hour gas station. When we got there, it was nearly empty. In fact, the only person we saw when we walked in was the guy working the register. When we went back out, however, we did see someone. It was a guy, maybe late 20s, had dark hair and was pretty short, but had a filled-out build. He put his hand up, trying to get our attention as he started walking towards us. He asked if he could get a light for his cigarette. After we did, he thanked us, and so we began walking away. But the guy followed us and asked where we were going. We told him that we had just left our friend's party for the night and were heading back home. He said something about him and his friends holding a party, and how they were having this massive firework display. He asked us if we wanted to join them. This is officially the point where I started questioning this guy's authenticity. Why would a guy in his 20s ask 2 teenage boys to join him and his friend's party and firework display? And at 2 a.m. no less. We told him bluntly that we didn't even know who he was, nor would we know anyone at the party, so we said no. He started laughing and told us that we needed to loosen up, that he just thought we looked like a couple of cool guys that would want to join. I was planning to leave it there, but he then continued to try and convince us, saying that there would be alcohol and a ton of girls. The guy was honestly starting to sound concerningly desperate to get us to go with him. I firmly, straight up told him, "Dude, we're not going anywhere with you." He got annoyed and started berating us for being unfriendly and inconsiderate. We just told him to leave us alone and walked away from the encounter. We both agreed that he was probably drunk or high on something. We were 5 minutes into walking down the street again, when we hear a car behind us slowing down to match our pace. We looked back and it was a white van. As it got closer, the driver's side window rolled down, revealing the same guy from the gas station. He tells us that we got off on the wrong foot and again asks us to come to his party. The censored version of what we said was just no. In reality, we used a lot stronger language to get our point across. The guy was silent for a few seconds, and then said, "One way or another, you're coming with us." The van's back slide door opened, revealing 2 other men with pistols pointed in our direction. Looking back, this might not have been the smartest move, but we turned and ran into a nearby park. We looked behind us in horror. The 3 of them were now out of the van and running after us. They were gaining on us, so we ran to the park's public bathroom, which thankfully was open. We locked the door behind us. We desperately tried to catch our breaths as our hearts were pounding. There was no way they didn't see us go in here. Sure enough, after a few seconds, someone started pounding on the door. It sounded like they were throwing their whole body at it. We called the cops and in a whisper told them where we were. They arrived minutes later. As soon as the sirens could be heard, the pounding on the door stopped. One of the things I noticed after exiting the bathroom was how much of a dent they left on the door trying to get it open. That door's any weaker and we would have been dead. We told the cops as much as we knew. My friend and I still talk about it to this day. We've tried to comprehend what they wanted to do with us. Rob us, hurt us, worse. We don't know, and we likely never will. All we can do is speculate. This incident has made me much more cautious of my surroundings. It's actually what pushed me to get my driver's license. I don't walk anywhere anymore, especially not at night.
Alright, story 3. Story 2, I like that one. If I were to call the cops, I'd probably tell them to turn their sirens off. That way they could actually be caught instead of like running away and getting away. But that one was like a nice, we'll say, 8 out of 10. On to story 3.
It was the 4th of July. Our family and some of our family friends were preparing a small get-together at our apartment complex. We had a small set of fireworks we planned to set off in the street once it got dark. Just as the sun was beginning to set, my daughter and her friends started begging for sparklers. They're those sticks you can hold that burn at one end, slowly giving off light. I could tell they were really excited about it, so I agreed to make the quick trip to Walmart to get a pack of them before it got completely dark outside. I hopped in my car and drove to the nearest Walmart. The store was pretty empty considering it was the night of the 4th of July. As I stepped out of my car and locked it, I noticed a man standing near the shopping cart drop-off area. He stood only a few feet away, pacing back and forth. I felt a bit uneasy, but ultimately ignored him and walked towards the Walmart entrance. The area had its fair share of junkies, so it wasn't that concerning. It took me a minute to find the sparklers, but once I did, I quickly made my way to the self-checkout. As I headed back to my car, to my surprise, the same man I'd seen earlier was still there, pacing back and forth by my car. I tried not to pay too much attention to him, and focused on getting to my car and locking the doors. I started the engine, but when I looked up, I froze. The man was now standing right in front of my car, completely still. He had his head down. I could now see he was in his early 20s. He had a large jacket on and a dirty pair of jeans. He was blocking my car from leaving the parking spot. I rolled down my window just enough to talk through it. "Hey man, can I help you?" After a few seconds, he looked up at me and asked if I knew anything about engines. I mustered the truth and said, "Not much, sorry." He stared at me for what felt like an eternity, his emotionless eyes piercing into mine. He then told me he thought his car's battery was dead and asked if I could help him. I shook my head and told him there's nothing I could do and that I didn't really know anything about cars. Which wasn't a lie, I actually don't. I took the car out of park, hoping it would get the guy to move. But he remained in front of my car, blocking my way out. I locked eye contact with the guy, hoping he would take the hint. But he didn't budge. Instead, his gaze shifted towards something behind me. I instinctively looked at my rearview mirror and saw a person wearing a ski mask sneaking around the side of my car. Without hesitation, I accelerated forward. The man stepped back and moved to the side. He reached for something in his jacket pocket, but I was gone before I could see what it was. As I sped to the parking lot exit, I glanced up at the rearview mirror. The two men chased me for a bit before giving up. To my surprise, 3 other guys emerged from the bushes near where my car had been parked, following the first 2 men. It became evident that I had just dodged an extremely dangerous and possibly life-threatening situation. I remember watching every car behind me as I drove back home, making sure I wasn't being followed. I figured I'd wait to tell anyone about what had happened till after the night was over so as not to kill the mood. I ended up never actually telling anyone, ever. It had already happened and I made it out fine, so I figured what was the use in causing any unnecessary panic? This is actually the first time I've ever told anyone about this story.
Alright, story 3, last video finished. That wasn't too bad. I like that one. I probably would have ran the guy over to get at least like 100 points for it. But other than that, I probably wouldn't have helped him out. I rate that story like 10 out of 10. I like that one. But that was all for this video. Let me know what you guys think I should watch or do next. And I'll see you guys in the next.